Hello and welcome to Journalists Hangout UK, the show where we discuss issues, both African and worldwide, which are affecting the continent. And we look at how those issues are seen at home and in the African diaspora. I'm effervescent, and I'm pleased to welcome our panel. Eva Simpson, journalist and broadcaster, Lanre Akinola, editor of African Business, and Tamzanko Jo, journalist and broadcaster. And joining us by Skype, Dr. Philip Adaiwo, APC Chairman, UK Chapter. Welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us. And a special welcome to you by Skype, Dr. Adaiwo. Thank you for joining us. And tell us, first of all, why this matters, this announcement of intent to make June 12th Democracy Day in Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Afua. I think that let's put and take things in context. I think that the announcement by President Buhari is beyond a statement of intent. We are having, for the first time in Nigeria's national history, a government or a city president apologizing for the wrong that has been done against an individual and millions of Nigerians, at a go. So I think that beyond a statement of intent, this is the first step in a healing process. It's the first step in bringing justice to the thousands of Nigerians who are cruelly treated and some murdered by a brutal dictator in the follow-up to June 12th election, 1993. And I think that beyond this initial step, I'm quite aligned with the statement by the National Assembly that President Moshood Abiola, should be declared president. The elections, the results of that election should be published, and the Abiola is not the presumed winner. He was clearly the winner of that election.
Well, I hear you, Philip, if I may, but I just want to unpick President Buhari's statement a little bit, because he did make a very unequivocal apology to the Abiola family, but he stopped short of saying that Abiola won the election outright. He talked about having received the highest number of votes, but he didn't say he was the rightful winner. So does this statement actually go as far as you're suggesting in declaring Abiola as the rightful winner of that election?
I totally and completely agree with you that the statement hasn't gone far enough. But I say that this is the first time we are having this kind of process started at all in the history of our country, Nigeria.
Okay. Thank you very much, Philip. Lanre, does this statement go far enough? And if so, does it represent, as Philip suggests, a step towards meaningful recognition of some of the wrongs that have been committed in recent decades in Nigeria?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. It's important in the sense that some responsibility is being taken here. I have living memories of June 12, 1993. I was in Lagos then. I remember the fear, the violence. I remember the angst around what was going on, the riots, and it was the beginning of one of the darker chapters of Nigerian history. So it is important that some responsibility is being taken, that was wrong. And I mean, everyone who was in Nigeria at the time will tell you, yes, that was the wrong choice. But it's ultimately symbolism, and symbolism is, of course, part and parcel of politics. However, symbolism is not going to fix Nigeria's political or social or economic problems. So we'll see if it can help be a catalyst for some meaningful action.
Tam, so this is about symbolism and politics as well as recognising wrongs that were done. Do you see this as some people have suggested, more of a political gesture? This certainly speaks to the Southwest, an area in which the APC has struggled. They've welcomed this. Do you see this as a political move, or one genuinely determined to try and achieve some kind of truth and reconciliation?
Politics is all about opportunities. President Buhari is facing an election. He's a politician. Even if it is not him, remember, he has a cabinet. He's got a deputy who is from that area. And when you talk about what happened in 1993, even before then, there were years of turmoil, a lot of people that died trying to bring democracy to Nigeria. And Chief Abiola is just a representation of that. But I think there's also a legal aspect because there were some challenges that were being mooted in court, people wanting to approach the court because they were saying this is an honor that is only reserved for presidents, and which is where the interpretation is being made that in giving this honor, President Buhari has actually said Chief Abiola won the presidency in 1993 before the intervention of the then President Babangida. But I think the way to look at this is to say that was a chapter, a transition, that those were events that triggered the democratization of Nigeria. And you had former President Olusegun Obasanjo then coming from that area. So if you were counting this in the bucket of politics, you would be saying somebody from the north, President Buhari, he has reached out to the Yoruba community and apologized on behalf of the Babangida administration. Not only that, but all the other administrations and everything else that was done, because that truth reconciliation process has not been done, and this is a step forward. Other presidents could have done it before because the family has been asking for this. Obasanjo didn't do that, Jonathan couldn't do that, Yaradua, all that time the request was being made for this kind of move to be taken.
Eva, just bringing this out a little bit, I mean, on one level, this is obviously about specific events that took place in Nigeria, but on another level, it seems to me it's about building a narrative of democracy and looking back and saying we had moments of free and fair elections, but they weren't respected, and kind of reimagining Nigeria as a country with a history of democratic moments that should be remembered. Do you think that that's an important symbolic
I think,
exercise?
as has been mentioned, as a symbolic gesture, it is important, and it's very rare. How often do we see world leaders apologise for past mistakes or for any mistakes? So any apology by a world leader it's significant and it's very bold. But ultimately, it's just one day that's being celebrated, and as has been mentioned before, there are so many more important problems in terms of infrastructure, in terms of poverty, healthcare, school crisis. That is what the focus should be on. And I think if there's too much focus on symbolic gestures like this, it takes away from what the government is actually doing to make lives better for the people who live in Nigeria.
And Philip, to bring you back in, Eva makes a very valid point. This is ultimately about another national holiday. Is that really what Nigeria needs?
I think that June 12, 1993 is beyond a national holiday celebration. June 12, 1993 represents in the annals of Nigeria's history a day when the collective psyche of Nigerians was brutalized by a very wicked dictator.
Lanre, do you agree with Eva's point that this could perhaps be a distraction, or could it lead to some really meaningful political and social healing from past events?
It could, but a lot of things will have to happen in order for that to be the case. To echo Tam's point, this is an election year, and no matter what the president says, no matter what the APC says, that is part of this. Part of this is trying to, work towards re-election next year. It could, but only if the political will is there, if the political will is sustained, and if it's followed up by concrete action. So yes, potentially, but potential is meaningless until you act on it.
Tam, you come from Zimbabwe, a country that has had its fair share of trauma and past wrongs. Does this inspire you as a way that we can now raise our expectation of leaders to apologise for past events and to have these moments of national consciousness that help change the narrative in the future?
It does, because when those kind of things happen, they affect families, they affect individuals. So those people that lost people during the crisis in Nigeria would have lived with that trauma for years and years. Some of them left the country, some of them are still struggling within the country. But when you see political leadership in the direction of something that will give you hope, that will recognize that you have gone through something like this, then that gives them an opportunity to approach their local representatives, their governors, their government officials, and begin to talk about it. In the case of Zimbabwe, just like most of these other countries, when there was a window of opportunity for people who went through the Gukurahundi massacres in the 80s to speak up, a lot of people in the country, especially from Mashonaland, who had no idea what had been going on, were surprised that you had a section of the population within the country who have lived with that kind of trauma, things that I can't describe on a family channel. So I think it gives hope to those people who are victims of what happened, to know that somebody is listening in Abuja, and that is important.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We're almost out of time, Philip. I want to just come to you for one very quick last thought. And my question is, you know, these are quite profound points about past wrong and suffering and national conscience. But why now? Why is this being apologized for and recognized right now?
Why not now? That is the question. Anytime that it's become possible for a wrong to be recognized, it is only right and natural that you should say sorry. That is what the president has done.
Thank you very much. We have to take a quick break
you.
now, but we do have plenty more to discuss. So please join us in a few moments.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to Journalist Hangout UK. I'm Effervescent and I'm pleased to welcome back our panel, Eva Simpson, Lanre Akinola and Tansanko Ejo. Welcome back to you all. And in this half, we are going to be talking about something closer to home. We're talking about the Grenfell Tower tragedy, whose first year anniversary we marked this week. And Eva, I want to come to you first on this. I suppose really this is a discussion on two levels. There's the whole technical side about what went wrong in this tower that led to 72 people losing their lives. And there is the social aspect of the fact that these were people from a certain socioeconomic group. People from the African diaspora were heavily represented, many of them were Muslim. Just turning to the first question really about how this fire started. 1 year on, how much have we learned and how are people responding to the information that's coming out?
Yeah, as you say, 1 year on, I think we're learning quite a lot about what's happened. Obviously, the public inquiry has started. We've heard already from the families, and we've heard a lot about the process. And I think I certainly, the more I hear about it, the more I just can't understand how something like this was allowed to happen. You had a building in the richest borough in the country, one of the richest boroughs in Europe, social housing, but it wasn't just social housing. There was a mixture of people living there. There were people who had used right to buy and had bought the properties and were living there. So it was a mixture of people living there. And then we find out about this alleged cladding that was put up and all the sort of fire regulations and everything that went into that may or may not have been quite sort of adhered to. And then you look at the pictures of how quickly the fire spread, and it all, your mind boggles. You just can't believe that something like that happened. The first time I went past Grenfell Tower, I had goosebumps. It was like you were in the middle of a war zone. You don't expect to see a burnt out shell in the middle of London. So I think it's good that there's a public inquiry, that we're learning more about it, but I think we shouldn't. And what I've liked about this week, if you can like anything about this week, is that the victims are front and centre of everything that's gone on. It's not all about process and cladding and what the letters whitewash.
Ordinary as well.
Who are of colour. Does this do any good in at least making it that much harder for people to be complacent about how unfair this society is and how at risk some of those communities
Well, one would
are?
hope, but these are deep systemic issues you're addressing here. That, you know, Grenfell is, had it not made the headlines that it did, had it not been so dramatic, I doubt we'd be sitting here talking about it, even if the same number of people had died. The response of the government immediately afterwards was telling. It was not a priority. They weren't that bothered. When they realized this was a global story, they realized they had made a mistake, which is, we should have at least pretended to care. There are much bigger questions around income inequality, around social mobility, that this country is not addressing in a meaningful way. They're choosing to blame immigrants rather than try to understand the mechanisms that underlie the economy that disproportionately punish poverty and reward wealth, which is the real, macro issue of which Grenfell has become this tragic symbol. It will help galvanize some activism. It certainly has created some discourse. I am not seeing much by way of meaningful action or debate around addressing the really underlying trends that are causing income inequality and a deterioration in social mobility in this country. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
We're almost out of time. Just one last quick word from you, Eva. What would you like to see happen that could make a difference?
Well, I'd like to see cladding of this type removed so people aren't in danger. I'd like to see the victims who are still without a home a year later rehoused in the borough where they lived. I don't think they should have to go miles away from the community that they've lived and their kids go to school in. So I think that has to happen first.
We're all out of time, but thank you all so much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today. Don't forget to follow us at RealJHUK on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. I'm Efwa Hirsch, and from the entire team in London, goodbye. And thank you for watching Journalists Hangout UK.